the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Go and learn what it means that I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus and the prophets of old, in various ways, make it clear that there are ways in which we can practice our religion that actually make our hearts grow smaller rather than larger. Micah the prophet, speaking on behalf of God, calls Israel to court to confront them about their hypocrisy and their rebellion. They despise and abuse the poor even while they're on their way to worship. They complain that God has turned the other way and forgotten them. And they ask, what do you really want from us, God? You're too demanding. God reviews his redemptive history with them. And then they offer a series of things that they can do to make God pleased. What do you want from us? Do you want us to sacrifice all the cattle that we own, the very best of them? How about offerings of oil? Well, how much will appease you? 1,000 barrels, 10,000 barrels, rivers of oil? Will that be enough? Maybe what you really want, Lord, is our firstborn child. Maybe we should just sacrifice. And the Lord responds, you know, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. Micah presents this phrase to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. It's a complete phrase. It's an intertwined and interdependent phrase that you can't have one without the other. You can't love mercy if you don't act justly. You can't act justly if you don't walk humbly with God. You can't walk humbly with God if you don't practice justice and you don't love mercy. For us as a faith community, we have taken Micah's words and we have chopped it up a little bit just for the sake of visioning the kind of people we want to be. And so week after week, I stand up and I say, we want to be a welcoming community. That is, we want to receive people into our lives, not just in this space, but in every space we find ourselves with the same grace and hospitality we have received. And waking up to God's love means learning to love mercy. And that's what I want to talk to you about in the next few minutes. Mercy in the Old Testament is a covenantal word. It was one that was used to describe God's attachment to his people Israel. It referred to God's enduring faithfulness, kindness, and caring. Mercy is the way God acts towards us. To love mercy is to have an affection or a longing for mercy. It's to value mercy, to hold it in high esteem. To love mercy is to prove ourselves loyal to both God and humanity, and to fulfill that great commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your strength, your mind, and your neighbor with the same energy that you love yourselves. Commentator Juan Alfaro, writing about this passage, says, mercy includes compassion and steadfast and loyal love. Loving mercy is a community-oriented activity expressed by helping and protecting those in need through the spirit of solidarity. Trying to get at that idea that those who have received mercy should radiate mercy in all of their relationships. On another occasion, those deemed unworthy of receiving mercy were gathering around Jesus to hear him speak. But once again, the religious folks the ordained ministers and the seminary professors and the bishops and all the others began to mutter, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them a story. It wasn't about a traveler going to the Austria. Well, that's a good story. It's one that you know so well. You may, in fact, know it too well. There was a man who had 2 sons. The older son was faithful, reliable, diligent, responsible, hardworking. He had broad shoulders from doing labor on the farm day after day, week after week, month after month. And the only thing bigger than his shoulders was his sense of responsibility and duty. His brother, the younger son, not so much. He was kind of skinny, a little antsy, distracted, and kind of good looking. But anyways, things got the best of him, and he would seem to do less than his share of the work. One day, the younger came to his father and said, "Dad, I can't wait for you to die. Can you please give me my inheritance now? I want to leave this smelly, stinky farm." And so his father divided the inheritance between them. Not long after that, the father stood at the door and watched as his son walked down the road until he disappeared into the horizon. And every night he would come to the door and make sure that it wasn't locked and that the light was still on, and he'd look down the lane and nurse the ache of his heart. But then there are just desserts. And the younger son, who had left with a wad of cash and no responsibilities, had moved to a large city where he could taste the best that life had to offer. When his pockets were empty, there was a severe famine in the land, so he took a job with a local farmer who said, "Go take care of my pigs." And somewhere in those long days of mucking pigs, he came to his senses and said, "How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough to eat? And yet here I am. I can't even feed myself on the pods that these pigs are eating. I know. I'll return to my dad and I'll say, 'Father, I have sinned. Please forgive me. Just make me one of your hired men. Please.'" So he got up and went to the father. And while he was a long way off, the father saw him and was filled with compassion. And he runs towards his son. He throws his arms around him and he grabs him and he kisses him. And the son begins to speak, "Father," and the father puts his fingers on his lips and says, "No, be quiet." And he turns to his servants and he yells out, "Quick, the fatted calf, bring the calf, and get my robe and some sandals and get my ring. My son who was dead is now alive. He has come home and we must celebrate." And so the party begins. The shadows of the day begin to lengthen as the older son makes his slow walk home down the dusty road to the barn and the stable. Brings the ox over to the stall for a drink. And then it's at that point he finally notices there's fiddle music in the air. So he looks over to a farmhand who's pitching hay and says, lightheartedly, "What's going on?" But the farmhand's no dummy and says rather cautiously, "It's your brother. He's come home, and your father is throwing a party for him." The brother can't take it. He can't believe it. His heart sinks, his teeth clench, and he says, "You got to be kidding me." And he walks away in silence. Back up at the house. The worry and heartache has floated off the father's heart like milkweed on the breeze. And inside, the people ate and they laughed and they played music. And the father danced like a man half his age. Maybe danced a little too much. And as the lanterns were being lit, the father looked to the door and his heart sank again. That feeling in his gut returned, and so he got up and slipped out into the courtyard where the older son sat in the shadows, brooding and boiling like a pot on the stove. His father went out to him and pleaded, "Come in." But the older son refused, and he let all of his hurt, all of it, all the injustice, he let it fly. He said, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you, never disobeyed your orders, not even once. Is there no justice in the world? You're going to take him back? Why should I even bother to do anything for you? I've wasted my life serving you. And this son of yours, he comes, spits in your face, brings shame on our family, runs off, stuffs his pockets with money, with your money, with my money. Really? You're going to take him back? You know what he did. He left here. He went down to the port. He spent all of his money on making friends, and now he's out of money, so he runs back home to you, and you're just going to take him in and kill the fatted calf. All my life, you have never even so much as given me a goat. My son," the father says, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours." But we had to celebrate and be glad because this son, your brother, was dead and now is alive. He was lost and now he is found. And Jesus says to all of us, "Go and learn what it means that I desire mercy and not sacrifice." The story, you know it probably as the prodigal son, but don't miss the main point. The story is about a father who has two sons, who both are alienated from him and whom the father seeks and pursues in order to draw in. And Jesus came saying, "I represent this father who is characterized by mercy. And those who belong to me should welcome one another with the same kind of mercy that I am offering them." Jesus says, "I reveal the compassionate, gracious God who is slow to anger, abounding in love, faithfulness, and maintaining love to thousands from generation to generation." Yes, younger brothers need to come to their senses and come home. But older brothers also need to come to their senses and know that it's not their goodness that merits the Father's love. More importantly, we need to celebrate the Father and the Son, celebrate along with the Father the Son's return. And remember that mercy is not just the doorway in which we enter the kingdom. It's the water we swim in. It's the air we breathe. Jesus says, "Go and learn what it means that I desire mercy and not sacrifice." A couple of words from one of my inspirations, Greg Boyle, who serves with gangs in California, who writes in one of his books, Tattoos of the Heart, the important thing that we need to learn is that kindness is the only strength there is. What we seek here is a compassion that can stand in awe of what others have to carry rather than stand in judgment as to how they carry it. Success and failure ultimately have little to do with living the gospel. Jesus stood with the outcast until they were welcomed or until he was crucified, whichever came first. That's what it means to become a welcoming community where others can wake up to God's love, is to be a people who love mercy above all else. Thank you, Lord, for your mercy. And from leaving the porch and tracking me down and drawing all of us into your welcome and embrace. May we mirror your love to each other and the world. Amen.
Would you please stand as we close?